Ladies and gentlemen, Devyo or Sajjano, a very good afternoon to all of you and welcome to this exciting webinar being organized by CADR, which is the Center of Excellence on Alternative Dispute Resolution at the Faculty of Law at Manav Rachna University. My name is Ajay Thomas. I'm the Director of the Faculty of Law at Manav Rachna University, and I'm delighted to be moderating this event with my colleague Chaitali Wadhwa, who is the faculty coordinator of our ADR Center. This webinar is the seventh in a series hosted by CADR on various topics relating to the law and practice of arbitration and ADR. Let me start off as usual by giving you a brief overview of the Faculty of Law at Manav Rachna University. We are a very young law school located in the Aravali Hills, right on the border between Faridabad and Delhi. Into our fourth year of operations, we offer 5-year integrated LLB honors programs and also a postgraduate program, including an LLM in commercial arbitration, which is perhaps the only one of its kind in India. The theme for today's webinar is soft way of doing hard things. Do women make better mediators? Ladies and gentlemen, I must admit that the first part of this topic derives its inspiration from an article written by Dr. Catherine Turner of Durham Law School. I did invite Catherine to be a part of this discussion, but sadly she could not make it. And her article is a fascinating account of the role of mediation and the role that women played in the peace process in Northern Ireland. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Justice of Singapore, Mr. Justice Sundaresh Menon, in a speech a few years ago had said, and I quote Mr. Menon, "This present age of arbitration is in fact its golden age, and those amongst us who practice it are extraordinarily privileged to be able to do so." So if one were to juxtapose this statement of the Honorable Chief Justice of Singapore, in light of the recent developments in the field of mediation, more particularly with the coming into force of the Singapore Convention on Mediation, I would like to believe, it's a personal opinion, that the golden years of mediation are not too far away. And it is in this context, ladies and gentlemen, that today's webinar would look into a plethora of mediation topics, including the skill sets necessary to be a good mediator, the unique skills which women bring to the process, the experiences of women as mediators, and their contribution to the development of mediation. Now, to do justice to that topic, we are privileged to have a very distinguished cast of speakers, which includes leading mediators from India and also Singapore. So here's a little more about our speakers. I start with Veena Rali. Veena is an advocate practicing at the Delhi High Court. She's been at it for 4 long decades. She is the current organizing secretary of Samadhan, which is the Delhi High Court Mediation and Conciliation Center. And in that capacity, she leads over 200 empaneled mediators. She received her basic training in mediation in India and her advanced training at the Quinney College of Law, the University of Utah in the United States, and also at the Strauss Institute for Dispute Resolution at the University of Pepperdine. She's an accredited mediator with CIR London and with SIMI in Singapore. Now, despite being a lawyer practicing mainly in the original side and doing commercial work, she's especially known for helping parties in family and matrimonial disputes. She's also been appointed mediator in several important commercial disputes by the Supreme Court and the Delhi High Court. Now, from New Delhi, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to the south of India, to Chennai. Our second speaker Chitra is a lawyer, a mediator, and an arbitrator with more than 25 years of experience. She is a founding trustee of the Foundation for Comprehensive Dispute Resolution, FCDR, based in Chennai. She's an accredited mediator with the Tamil Nadu Mediation and Conciliation Center next to the Madras High Court. She is also with the Compliance Advisory Ombudsman of the World Bank Group and also part of the Global Mediation Panel for Workplace Disputes for United Nations agencies. Chitra was part of a national committee of mediators working on the mediation legislation in India. She's a joint editor of the 16th edition of Pollock and Mullah on the Indian Contract and Specific Reliefs Act. She's a specialist editor for the 7th edition of C.R. Datta on competition law and a specialist editor for the 18th edition of Ramaya's Guide to the Companies Act in India. As a lawyer, Chitra has worked in corporate commercial law, both in transaction advisory and dispute resolution. She's been a partner with leading law firms prior to setting up her own independent practice. She's a graduate of the National Law School of India University in Bangalore and has had a master's in law and development from the University of Warwick, where she attended as a Chevening scholar. She's a Weinstein Jams International Fellow and is a professor of practice with the Dutch Fellowship at Sai University in Chennai. Now, ladies and gentlemen, from Chennai, we move across the Bay of Bengal into the Straits of Malacca to Singapore and Hazel Tang. Now, Hazel is the counsel in charge of the ICC's Court of Arbitration's case management team in Singapore. Before joining the ICC, Hazel was the center director of the Singapore International Mediation Center and also an accredited mediator in Singapore and in Shanghai. Hazel was also a partner in the international arbitration practice with a leading Singaporean law firm and was also based in China for a while as a representative of the firm's Shanghai offices. Now, moving on, ladies and gentlemen, from the speakers, our distinguished speakers, to the delegates. We have a mixed bag of attendees today, comprising mediators, advocates, researchers, and also students and university professors. What is really encouraging to note, ladies and gentlemen, is that our attendees come from different parts of India and also from 14 other jurisdictions, including Portugal, Serbia, Romania, Algeria, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Qatar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Indonesia, Singapore, the Philippines, and the land down under, Australia. Now, I must say that this is a fantastic response in terms of the sheer geographical spread of our attendees and also the variety in terms of the, in terms of the numbers and the profile of our attendees. And we must thank all of you for your support to this knowledge sharing and capacity building initiative of the Center for Alternative Dispute Resolution at Manav Rachna University. Now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to tell you briefly about the format for this webinar. Our distinguished speakers, the three of them, will kickstart the discussions by delivering their introductory remarks on a particular aspect of the theme for about 15 minutes. Once all the speakers have spoken, we shall then have about 20 to 25 minutes of open forum discussions, which would also include questions and answers. You're requested to use the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen, and please type in your questions in that questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. You could do this at any point during the course of the webinar and not necessarily wait until the question and answer session. As a matter of fact, the sooner you send us your questions, the greater are the chances of we being in a position to take them up. Now, before I invite Chitra to speak, I'm tempted to share with you a story narrated by the grand old man of arbitration in India, Fali Nariman, at an arbitration conference a few years ago. I'm sure some of you have heard this one before, but I think it's always worth listening to it again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of a master of Zen Buddhism who once invited one of his students over to his house for a cup of afternoon tea. The teacher and the student talked for a while, and when the time came for tea, the teacher poured the tea into the student's cup. Even after the cup was full, the teacher continued to pour into the student's cup, resulting in the tea overflowing from the cup and spilling onto the floor. The student was shocked at first by the teacher's act, but he slowly mustered courage and said to his teacher, "Master, oh master, you must stop pouring. The tea is overflowing from the cup." The teacher paused and replied, "That's very observant of you, my dear student. And the same is true with you. If you are to receive any of my training or teaching, you must empty out what you have in your mental cup." So, ladies and gentlemen, many of us, when we attend events such as this webinar, we participate in these events with our respective mental cups full to the brim. I do hope that if you were to try and attempt to empty that mental cup, this webinar with this fantastic panel of speakers will fill your mind with refreshing new perspectives on the mediation process and the important contribution made by women in the development of mediation in India and internationally. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I have great pleasure in inviting our first speaker, Chitra Narayan, to deliver her preliminary remarks. Chitra, over to you, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Ajay and Chaitali, for inviting me to speak on this panel. When I heard the topic, I realized that the topic was meant to provoke. I mean, that's how I understood it, and I was provoked. This is the way I sort of look at the topic. The topic stacks soft women mediation on one side, and it stacks hard men and adversarial dispute resolution or litigation on the other. And to me, you know, these binaries are problematic. It's problematic if you were to sort of, you know, align the mediation process as soft or women as soft, and the problems are here. This is the problem is that these don't fit into silos in the manner that you know, the topic suggests, that it is a soft way of doing hard things, categorizing women as better mediators again is a problem I have, because again that sort of boxes them and boxes what women mean, boxes what mediation means. I also think there's a lot of there's a heavy sort of interrelationship between mediation and adversarial dispute resolution. They support and sort of bolster each other's use and purpose enormously. And so to sort of put them in binaries is something I'm not able to sort of get my head around. And the third aspect is that I think this also, you know, when you say women are good mediators, what are these characteristics that we're talking about that women have, and why are we sort of excluding the responsibility of men, you know, as being good mediators? So these were the sort of issues that I wanted to sort of bring to the forefront, and I want to talk about mediation and women, you know, in a different perspective. And the questions that I would have, or the points that I would address in this topic are, do women really make better mediators? Is mediation a soft way of doing things? And are there many women mediators? How many women are there in mediation? To take up the first aspect, is mediation a soft way of doing things? Let's first look at what a mediation process is. Mediation is a process where disputing parties try and arrive at a settlement of their disputes with the help of a neutral, through discussions between them that the neutral facilitates. The distinction here in mediation is that the neutral does not decide the dispute for them. The neutral does not impose a settlement on the parties, and it is the parties who decide how they want to resolve the dispute. The mediation is a structured process. The parties come together, they listen to each other on their experiences with the conflict, their perspectives of the conflict and the dispute. So they express what they have gone through, the other party listens to them, or parties listen to them. And the mediator then moves the parties into looking at their interest in resolving this dispute, and slowly towards generating options to resolve this dispute. And if the parties are able to come to an agreement, there is a settlement, there is an agreement. So the parties decide if and how they will settle the dispute. The process is a very structured process. It's not ephemeral. It's not, let's resolve and we resolve it. It's very, very structured. It is also a demanding process, not soft in the least. And the demands it makes of the parties are this. The parties with their advisors evaluate the various aspects of the dispute. They evaluate the law, they evaluate their interests, they evaluate technical aspects that may come into play, and they evaluate what would be a good settlement for themselves. Not soft in the least, because these are sort of assessments that the parties are making through the process. The more demanding aspect of the mediation process is the fact that the parties will decide how the dispute will be resolved. Unlike litigation or arbitration, where you have the judge or the arbitrator who's making a decision for them, and which in some ways is a lot easier, here it is the parties who are making these hard decisions for themselves. So not a soft process. This is a really hard process, that parties choose to go through. Moving to the next aspect of women in mediation, I will speak for how things are in India. There are many women who are mediators in India, and we have exemplary leaders, women leaders in mediation, leaders who have sort of redrawn maps for mediation, redrawn boundaries for mediation, and who have led by example. Veena ji is one of them. There's Laila Ullapalli, there is Sadhna Ramchandran, Uma Ramanathan, Pushya Sitaraman, all senior women who have done a great deal, in carrying the mediation message forward. If I'm not mentioning other names, it's because I'm not able to recall immediately, but many women in mediation, and I think the mediation community is representative of women in the profession. From here, I'd like to go on to looking at the question of do women make better mediators? This takes us to the point of the first sort of aspect that I'd like to talk about on this is do women make better mediators, in the sense that are their experiences, do they, make them better mediators and more sort of sensitive to the issues that women face? Again, I don't think this could be the case, but I don't think it's necessarily so. Again, I think an approach like this sort of exonerates men or other genders from being sensitive to issues that women face. And I think I have a problem with women being set as a class or as a category. I think what the more important aspect here is the disempowerment and the challenges that women face, and that's ongoing, and that's real, and that really is the aspect of the aspect of the matter. So when you look at this and when you ask the question, are women better mediators? this also sort of raises issues on a very vexed question that mediators face, and that is a question of neutrality in mediation. Are the mediators expected to be neutral? And if they're sensitive to issues that women, vulnerable groups, disempowered communities based on caste and class, the issues they face, is the sensitivity of the mediator to these issues, does that deprive the mediator or affect the mediator's neutrality? The other issue that comes up for women in mediation is this, that and this is a criticism of mediation that many women have raised. The criticism is this, that mediation works on a balanced playing field, on a level playing field, and if there are imbalances in mediation, imbalances in society, don't these imbalances play out in mediation? And the question that researchers like Trina Grillo, who's writing has had an enormous impact, and I think the other person would be Laura Nader. They ask the question, don't women or don't mediators bring the prejudices and sort of the systemic disadvantages that vulnerable groups face into the mediation? And given that it is a private process, how do you reckon whether there is justice in the process and in the outcomes that parties may come to? So there is this other person, this researcher called Waldman, Ellen Waldman, who has sort of taken together these discussions, and she speaks about the various stages that mediation has gone through with respect to vulnerable groups and disempowered groups, not confined to women. And she talks about how mediation is a process of norm generation, where parties work out a resolution based on their interests, and therefore they work under the shadow of law, but based on their interests, the resolutions that they reach need not necessarily be based on entitlements that are located in law. And this is important in mediation because law often does not address a lot of issues that come up. Let me take an example from intellectual property. If there is a concurrent development and honest development of an intellectual property by two or more parties, the law doesn't have an adequate sort of remedy for it. It still makes the law choose one over the other. Law doesn't have an adequate remedy for live-in relationships or civil partnerships in India, for sure. Law doesn't have an adequate answer for, say, gay relationships or gay marriages. Mediation then is a better option. So this is the norm generation that mediation facilitates. But how would this work if there was an imbalance between the parties, or if there was a vulnerable sort of person at the table? Things have moved from norm generation to norm education, where the mediators take on the responsibility of informing the parties about values, about standards, about laws, and about entitlements, but leaving the outcome of the resolution to the parties. It is for the parties to take this up and reach a resolution that keeps these aspects as a part of the resolution. The third is bringing in norms and helping parties evaluate and consider these norms in their resolution, and this is akin to conciliation or evaluative mediation. Here the facilitator evaluates, makes suggestions on how the dispute can be resolved, and brings these values to play in the resolution that parties may consider. Again, the parties decide what the resolution is. So these were the aspects that I wanted to talk about when I saw the topic. And yes, back to you, Ajay.
Thank you, Chitra, for your insight into the controversy regarding the topic. And thank you for so beautifully actually bringing out the essence of what I really had in mind when we came up with that topic. So it was meant to provoke, but and it was meant to initiate a discussion. And I think you've very successfully done that with your preliminary remarks. We move on now to Veena Rali. Veena, over to you for your preliminary remarks.
Thank you, Ajay. And first of all, thank you very much for giving this golden opportunity, I will say, of sharing this valuable panel and talking about soft way of doing hard things. Do women make better mediator? First of all, I must congratulate you for selecting this topic. You must have deliberated a lot in selecting this topic. I can see that. The topic itself conveys that mediation is not so easy as it appears. Generally, what people understand from mediation is to bring people to a common ground. Yes, it is. But it is not so simple as it appears. Mediation is all about skills. It is a skilled process whereby, as it appears, mediation is all about skills, and it is a skill process whereby a neutral third person facilitates communication between the conflicting parties and assists the conflicting parties to negotiate, to reach to a resolution. This communication is not about speaking. It is about listening, and that too active listening. What is active listening? That needs to be understood. Active listening is to understand the context and content of the conflict and understand both spoken or unspoken words, and then contain the conflict in a way so that it does not burst and does not result into disaster. The active listening means the message is conveyed and understood in the right perspective, in the right context. It is about the ability to understand sometimes even unspoken word, that is silence. It requires empathy and the ability to connect with parties in a particular way. Give the parties the feel that they have been heard and understood. In mediation, getting the parties to a stage where talks are even possible is a breakthrough in itself. Talks may be formal or secret or both parallel. Mediator is required to set agenda for discussions and hold mediation sessions and then steer the discussions in such a way where parties reach to a resolution. This is the only process where dispute resolution is basically the outcome is in the hands of the parties. How to separate the problem from the person and bring the person to a focus. To focus on the problem and not the person is a task in the hands of the mediator. And you know what we generally speak, a mediator should have perseverance, persistence, patience, patience, and only patience. So this is the clear that mediation is not so easy as it appears. Rather, it is the one of the hardest things which is reflected even in your topic. Because this is a process which keeps the parties, basically, it helps the parties to resolve their conflict. It's not merely the dispute which is on the surface. In this process, one does not work as a panchayat or as a panchas. What does pancha do? A panch decides for the parties. In this process, the task is in the hands of the mediator to empower the parties to take a call, to decide for themselves. It is the duty of the mediator to keep moving the process in such a way that parties reach to a resolution. And how it is done? It is done by using some communication and negotiation skills, by asking right questions. Sometimes even, you know, what are the right questions? That also is a technique which is to be imbibed. Open-ended, sometimes clarificatory questions, and sometimes even closed questions, but of course, only a skilled person can understand at what stage those closed-ended questions are to be asked. I will say that gone are the days when the general impression was either you are a male or a misfit. In this world of equality, it is really difficult to say that women make better mediators. The discourse today takes us to the arena where women were perceived to be performing better in certain specific fields like teacher, like nurses. We could always imagine a teacher being only a female teacher, a nurse being only a female nurse. Why? Because that passion and compassion or Midas touch of the female, we feel that there are certain fields which are specific to a female perspective and only female can do better in that field. And this is how we have been perceiving, we have been brought up in that environment, in that culture. Women were considered the peace builders. They are considered the tailors of social fabric of their families and communities even. They can create sustainable understanding between various conflicting parties or groups. Look at the houses, within the houses, what happens when children are fighting? Generally the grandma or mom or sister is called. If brother is called, what happens? They just separate the people and put them in separate rooms. But if a female sister is coming, she will try to manage the things. This is how we have been brought up in that environment. You can say that with all biological limitations, women can significantly shoulder the responsibility of primary caretaking of the family and also can discharge her responsibility as mediator with her softness and can handle difficult people and their difficult conversations and can lead them to resolution. But irrespective of the gender, some feel that having been once a parent makes them better mediator, because creating balance between their work and home, parents and children make them more sensitive and patient and simply improve their negotiation skills. But some feel that mostly women create balance in the families. So this is a school of thought. Some feel that women are much more rational and have the skills that are necessary to develop rapport with people to make them feel that they are understood. They are perceived to have got higher levels of interpersonal skills, including emotional intelligence and empathy, which are important parts of the mediation. People feel that women have the inherent soft skills, as it is reflected even in the topic, and they can bring those soft skills to mediation. Of course, women as mediators are perceived to be non-threatening, because some of the times, when very high profile people and powerful people walk into the room, they feel that the environment is very comfortable and which they may not find with male mediators. They are best relied as confidantes and can provide extensive support to the parties in conflict. Ability to listen and help the conflicting parties to negotiate with empathy is possible for a woman easily. With these qualities, people prefer female mediators over male and may be considered better for handling difficult conversations of the conflicting parties. This may be considered as a soft way of doing hard things. Women have the ability of building rapport with the parties and creating trust between the parties. With their softness, they can challenge the difficult attitudes of the conflicting parties. With their inherent soft skills, they can play difficult roles. Women can bring their soft skills and more caring approach to their role as mediators. Of course, presence of a female mediator promotes a less aggressive approach. As I said, that it controls the environment immediately. They can make people more comfortable and can create an atmosphere of warmth, and they can bring in even humor very easily. The qualities essential for mediation are exhibited more by women in a natural way. But that does not mean that men do not have those skills. Those skills can be found equally in a man like a woman. And when one wants to be a mediator, one needs to go for a training. That is why the importance of training in mediation is important. Men can have passion, men can have compassion, they can have soft skills of handling family members, societies. But for mediation, what is important is to adopt and to learn the techniques of communication and negotiation by undergoing that training. It is a specialized skill which can be imbibed through training irrespective of the gender. They are part of it. There is a curriculum for that. All type of techniques are taught and they are not gender specific. Irrespective of the gender, the curriculum is there, which trains them to help the parties to be creative in conflict resolution, irrespective of their gender. So rather, training also helps them to deal with their biases and including gender bias. So there is another school of thought. I'll just share that also with you, according to which the softness of the woman can prove to be dangerous also and fatal to the process. Because sometimes, this is, I'm just sharing out of my experience, when male parties perceive bias when they find a female mediator sitting there and their counterpart is a female. So it's a big challenge. So what is important here is that they feel that women mediator will act as advocate for women. So what I think that it is not the gender, and to create gender balance, it is better to have, as I do also in my center, to have a combination of both to create gender balance, give that environment comfort to both the parties where there are two different parties, one is female and one is male, one is man, one woman, and whatever way the parties are there to create that gender balance, we can have a combination of two. So applying the gender lens for mediation may not yield sustainable results. So what I feel that what is important is for the mediator, irrespective of the gender, to use one's toolkit, which we learn, we carry after the training. After the training, another training, refresher trainings, advanced trainings, that toolkit one has, whether it is a female or a male, that is what helps the parties to resolve their conflicts. So my perspective is that women's participation as mediator is simply a question of equality and fairness, and they as such don't get an edge over men. So all are equal. We need to show our neutrality when we help the parties facilitate mediation and help them to resolve their disputes. I think, Ajay, this is what I want to say in the meeting.
Thank you, Veena, for that fantastic analysis of the topic and your perspectives. Now we move on to Singapore. We move on to Hazel Tang, and Hazel is going to give us, the cross-border perspective, the Singaporean perspective, and also she's been an institutional representative now with the ICC and earlier with the Singapore International Mediation Center. So to have that perspective, I now hand over the mic to the virtual mic, if I may call it, to Hazel Tang.
Thank you, Ajay, for that. And thank you to CADR for organizing this and for inviting me to this very good webinar with a very interesting topic. Soft way of doing hard things. Do women make better mediators? I would like to first approach this from the institutional perspective. Here at ICC, we do recognize that diversity is good for business, and we acknowledge the underrepresentation of women on many levels, be it in events, arbitrator appointments, or mediator appointments. And that is why many years ago we signed the Gender Pledge to ensure that this ensure that a level playing platform is created to take this into account. ICC's commitment to gender diversity in particular extends to the mediation sphere very much as well. Last year in 2019, about 41.2% of the mediators appointed were women. At the moment, we actually have an all-women team at the International Center for ADR, which is the team that manages the ICC arbitrations. As Chicha has shared, at its core, it is about leveling the playing field and creating a platform where good quality candidates, be they men or women, can have an equal opportunity of being appointed. It's about the underrepresentation. It comes down to finding someone who is the right fit for the case in terms of experience, industry expertise, or qualifications. Especially training that Veena has mentioned. Training is very important for any mediator. Now, ICC does not have a closed list of mediators. In fact, we don't have a panel of mediators. In the majority of our cases, appointments are usually done by joint nomination of parties. after a list of potential mediators is proposed by the ADR Center, using ICC's network supported by the national committees in every country and also free search. As a matter of practice, the Center always tries to ensure that the list of potential mediators provided to parties has some female representation of the right fit for the case. So far, from our experience, we have not received any specific requests from parties asking for a male or female mediator in particular. So it is an interesting question. Do women make better mediators? To answer this, I first ask myself, what makes a good mediator? To answer that, a good starting point would be to think about what is the role a mediator plays in a mediation. As my learned colleagues Vina and Chitra has shared, a mediator is not there to decide who is right or wrong, or to render any decision on the dispute. A mediator is a neutral third party who is there to facilitate the mediation process between the parties in dispute and to assist the parties in bridging the gap. Sounds simple? I think by now you know that it is more difficult than it sounds. As Vina has shared, to carry out this role as a mediator, he or she must be able to communicate effectively with the parties and discover what are the parties' real interests underlying the formal positions they have taken in the dispute, to find out what really matters for them and what they really want in order to close the gap and settle the dispute. As such, a good mediator will probably need to pick up both verbal and non-verbal cues from the parties and ask the right questions or the necessary questions in the right way to get parties thinking about what options they can offer or accept in order to resolve the dispute and move on. I totally agree with what Vina says. Perseverance, persistence, patience, and patience are very important qualities for a good mediator. It would certainly help if the mediator has the patience and commitment to walk the parties through the process, tackle issue by issue, and to guide the parties towards generating options that will be acceptable to both so they can resolve the dispute. Sometimes the mediation session itself can be very intense. One of the mediations I've experienced started at 9 a.m. on the first day and ended at 4 a.m. the next day because parties had flown in specially for that dispute, and it was important to finalize and sign a settlement agreement then. So stamina probably would be one of the things that any good mediator should have as well in order to see the process through. A good mediator will also have to have mastery over the flow of the process and be able to assess when is an opportune time to have a private caucus or a private session with one of the parties, when he or she should let parties talk it out and ventilate whatever issues or emotions they may have underlying the dispute, and when to give parties that one needed nudge in the right direction in order to have a settlement. But sometimes a good mediator will also have to be strong to keep the process on track and to enforce certain ground rules that have to be set at the beginning of the mediation, particularly if the parties are being obstructive to the process or disrespecting the other party or the mediation process itself. So I suppose a good mediator must be an effective communicator, one who is patient and committed to the process, and able to build good rapport with the parties and be sensitive to not just the emotions, but also the non-verbal cues in the room. Yet strong and able to maintain a discipline over the parties to keep them on track during the process. Are these traits then more female or male? What is a female mediator? That's the next question I ask in exploring this topic. A female mediator is typically associated with qualities like having empathy, patience, being more understanding, with a more tuned sensitivity to emotions, and the ability to multitask. But are these attributes true, necessary of all female mediators? Does it mean then that none of the male mediators have these attributes? It is a pity that among the panel today, we don't have a male counterpart to comment on this as well. But the question, so do women indeed make better mediators? My personal view is women make good mediators just like any other. And that, I think, would be my preliminary thoughts on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. Thank you, Veena ji, and thank you, Chitra. I'd like to take this opportunity to begin with and open the forum for discussion. And I'd like to ask my first question, particularly with reference to the title, since it has been a very thought-provoking one. The question is that if you say that a woman mediator is seen as having soft skills, will this instill a false perception among their male counterparts that they're not equipped to handle the mediation process, which we clearly established is a harder process? And this is a question which is open to all the respected panelists, whoever would like to answer.
Let me pass it on to Hazel or Veena ji, because I don't think women are naturally endowed with soft skills.
Maybe I'll take this one first. Like Chitra and Veena has said as well, I think that soft skills are present in both genders. And while some may say that the female mediator can be more naturally attuned to soft skills, I have seen my fair share of very strong women as well. So I'm not sure that's necessarily true. But these skills all can be taught. And I think Veena can speak more about this in terms of the training that her center provides. All these skills that are necessary to be a good mediator, including the soft skills and the hard skills, can be part of your toolbox if you go for the essential training.
Yes, Hazel, you are right. So far as softness is concerned, there are soft skills inherent in women, but sometimes, as I said, that they are very dangerous as well, because when we use those soft skills without our training and without our understanding of the process of mediation properly, or sometimes when we get swayed by emotions of the parties and we forget about our training as mediators or our role as mediator, and we become advocate for one of the parties, or we start sympathizing with one of the parties instead of empathizing. So there are challenges both ways. So that is why I say skill, and as you use the word toolbox, which we carry with us as a mediator, to be hard on the problem and not on the person, making parties also to realize that they have to be hard on the problem and soft on the persons. These are very, very important for everybody, irrespective of the gender of the mediator. Any good mediator will be applying all these skills and will help the parties, facilitate the parties to resolve their conflict, irrespective of their gender.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think it would be safe to assume that gender could not be seen as being essential for a mediation process. It's essentially the skill set which is important. I do, however, have a question for Chitra. You had talked about the different women mediators who have created a significant mark for themselves in India. However, the list is comparatively shorter compared to other jurisdictions. So do you see mediations becoming a woman-only space in the near future?
My list was illustrative.
Yes.
I think the point I made was that I was speaking about leaders in mediation, and there are many, many leaders in mediation in India who, I mean, the kind of innovative efforts they've taken to build and grow mediation is quite remarkable. And but I just off the top of my head, the names that came to me were what I said. But there are, I think, women. In mediation, I think women are very fairly represented as mediators in the profession. Sorry, now going back to your question, what was that again?
The question was, do you see mediations in India becoming a woman-only space in the near future?
I don't think, I mean, I don't expect to see it as a woman-only space. Not at all. I think, you see, I've heard other mediators speak of women mediators speak of a tendency for parties to prefer them for matrimonial disputes, but not hard commercial disputes. So this gender bias continues, and I think some people will continue to think that men make better mediators for the hard cases.
May I just add, Chitra, something here? Though you said hard cases, maybe I think if I'm right in understanding, you meant commercial matters. But what I feel as a, but I know that I wanted to go ahead on from here only, and I think handling matters full of emotions is harder than handling merely commercials, because there are no emotions involved in those commercial matters.
If I can just chip in there from the Singapore perspective, some of our top mediators, and by top I mean the ones with the most cases, in Singapore, at least from what I know, are actually male mediators, and they do a fair bit of matrimony cases and think emotionally high-strung cases as well. And just with that, we also have female mediators doing commercial disputes. Now, there may be a perspective among the clients or the parties that a certain gender may be able to handle a particular dispute better. I have yet to see statistics to that effect. From my own experience, I think some of the male mediators are perfectly good at matrimony disputes, and some of the female mediators are very good at commercial disputes. So that's the reality, but the perspective may be a different situation. So we will have to see how that plays out eventually.
Thank you. I do have another question for you, Hazel, and I would also like Veena ji to give her Indian perspective to this. Are there any institutional changes that you would like to see, or any structural changes that you would recommend to see more participation of women in the mediation process from an institutional perspective?
Well, I'm not sure what is the practice in other institutions, so I speak from my own experience within ICC. One of the things that we consciously do is to ensure that when we appoint mediators, we don't just by default go for the easiest or the first name that comes to mind. We actually do take a lot of effort to ensure that the list of mediators that we give to parties to consider has a representation of women mediators. So that actually helps a lot because to achieve the over 40% female appointments last year was through the effort of the institution, because we had to make sure that for every case that we have, parties are given a choice. But at the end of the day, it is still parties' choice. And what we can do is to ensure where we can play a part, we make sure that women are not underrepresented, but more needs to be done in terms of education and also to promote female mediators so that parties are aware of their expertise and would be willing to appoint them when they have a dispute.
Thank you, Hazel. Veena ji, could you please give your
Yes,
perspective to this?
Chetali, so far as my institution is concerned, that is Samadhan, we have more or less equal representation of male and female mediators. Little you can say that number of female mediators is little more than male mediators. That may be because, again, that soft skill of women, maybe that is the reason, but otherwise, irrespective of whether they are male or female mediators, the matters are referred to the mediators based on the subject involved and the experience of the mediators, and definitely the age of the parties also sometimes it matters. So these are two criteria which I keep generally in mind, and particularly suppose there is one particular matter in which I feel it is a family matter but commercial involvement is there. In those situations, I have been given the freedom to appoint two mediators as well. One can handle the emotional part of the family involved, and other can handle commercials. And this doesn't mean that only female is taking care of that family part, that can be male as well. And I'll be rather very clear on this part that we have mediators on our panel who are male mediators, and they are in demand for matrimonial and family matters as well, because they feel that if this man can be handled, he can only be handled by a man, because if it is a matrimonial dispute, they expect that somebody strong, not a soft person, should be there. So there are many perspectives which we get, and we do get requests, though appointment is by the organizing secretary, but we do get messages from the parties. They come to us and they request for change of mediator, and as Hazel pointed out, it is the choice of the parties. We are not hesitant at all in changing the mediators. And our mediators are also very open at that stage, and they don't mind if they are being replaced by someone else from the panel.
Thank you, Veena-ji. I'd like to invite Mr. Thomas to take over with respect to the remaining questions.
Sure. In fact, Veena, you raised the issue of the combination of a man and a woman in the mediation, and that's exactly a question which has come from Mr. Koduri Venkataramana. He says, how about a combination of man and woman in a mediation? Will it be successful? So
it is very successful, Rajay.
Okay, all right, excellent.
Please.
No, please go ahead, Veena.
Now, what I say that there are certain matters where we feel that a combination of both is going to be more successful than only a single mediator, be it a female or a male. And sometimes we appoint even two female mediators in the same matter. Not only one male and one female, keeping in mind the requirement of the matter, we can appoint even two females in the same matter. So it all depends what type of matter. Suppose there are more female parties in that matter, then we prefer that more mediators are required, more than one, and even two female mediators are appointed. And we have seen successful results in that.
What about Chitra? Would you have any experiences that you have seen with respect to a combination of a man and a woman mediator in the same mediation?
I have mediated with male mediators.
Okay. And how has that experience been, if I may say? If you could share those experiences, has it been a happy one?
Of course, yes, it has been a happy one. They've all been happy ones, as have been my co-mediations with women mediators. I think I find male mediators are empathetic, and we're all trained similarly, so we bring, I think, similar, maybe slightly varied skills as persons to the mediation.
Sure. There's a question from Javad AJ. Now, Javad says, unlike litigation, mediation is predominantly an intuitive process where the right brain plays a more important role. Women are believed to be more intuitive with a stronger right brain function than men. Women are also more empathetic than men. Would this not make women better mediators? Because women have a better right brain function, a stronger right brain function. So that's his question. It's an observation and a question.
If I may answer here, this intuitiveness of a female does not work so well in the process of mediation, because as a mediator, we have to control our own intuitiveness, our own thought processes. We have to see every problem from the party's perspective, and from their point of view, we have to analyze the problem as a neutral third person, irrespective of our gender. So that intuitiveness rather sometimes may lead us to disasters. This is what I feel. We have to control our intuitions, and we have to go and try to follow the process in such a way so that we understand the problem from the party's point of view and help them to resolve that, and basically get them what they are looking for.
No, it's very interesting, Veena, what you've said, because that flows in very nicely to the next question that you've received from Uma Ramanathan. Now, Uma says that would not neutrality be compromised if the female mediator's compassion and empathy plays an important and dominant role in the process? So, do you think that because yes, Hazel?
Yes, I just want to jump in here because there's so many presumptions being made at this stage, and I just want to flag this. The assumption that female mediators are more empathetic, which then assumes that men are not empathetic. The assumption that women can handle emotions better, which then assumes that men cannot handle emotions. All these are presumptions that I question, because I have seen mediators, both male and female, being adept at both and being terrible at both. So I'm not sure, I haven't seen statistics that have persuaded me that these presumptions are necessarily true. And even for female mediators who are more empathetic, and there are some who are, it doesn't mean that they necessarily bring this into a mediation. Any trained mediator knows that their role in the dispute is not to sympathize with the parties, not to side with the parties. They're there to facilitate the communication between the parties. And they have the same toolkit. Both male and female mediators have the same toolkit to do that. So the idea that a female mediator necessarily brings her sympathies and empathies into the role of mediator, that is a presumption that I strongly question. So I just had to jump in there.
I think the point that is made on neutrality, I agree with Hazel, as far as these presumptions go, and as far as the point on neutrality is concerned, I think it's an important point, and I think it's very difficult for mediators to maintain absolute neutrality. We have our politics, we have our sensitivities, both men and women. I don't wish to limit this to women. We have our priorities. We have, all of that. Our training as lawyers, our environment, everything. I think all of this plays a role, and it's running around in our mind. And I think the important thing is to be cognizant of it. Not to wish a particular settlement because we feel, that would be better. But having said that, there are mediators, I think, who, and this is Ellen Waldman's, piece as well. There are mediators who, when called upon to evaluate or when called upon to suggest solutions by parties, do bring in these values that are dear to them. In the context of environmental disputes or public disputes, you have mediators like Lawrence Huskin who don't place such a great emphasis on neutrality. They do talk about the mediator's responsibility in designing the process, in making sure that all the parties who have an interest in the process are a part of the discussion, possibly bringing an expert into the discussion. So whether there is an information asymmetry, the expert is able to bring in aspects and sort of information, technical information to the dialogue. Looking at neutrality as yes neutral, or or as a binary, as neutral or not neutral, I think is also sort of misunderstanding what the mediator does in the process. It is important to be mindful that we are not neutral people, but I think there are layers and layers to this in the mediation process and for the mediator.
There's a question from Sukriti Kapoor from the Australian National University. And Sukriti's question is, what kind of cultural sensitivity training is given to mediators in India so as to protect the process from inherent biases? So perhaps Veena can give us a perspective with respect to training, because you're one of the leading mediation trainers in India. So what can be done in terms of to enhance cultural sensitivity?
Yes, I think Sukriti has raised a very good question, because in our country, culture changes after every 20-25 kilometers, and we need to imbibe those qualities where we can just understand the culture of a particular area, community, and we need to handle that, because cultural environment plays a very, very important role in the causes of conflict, and same way it helps in basically in the process where we can help the parties to resolve their conflicts. So far as training is concerned, in the basic training is just for getting the skills of mediation. They are not so culturally, you can say, motivated. They are not so culturally planned. But of course, since our training is for people who are having various cultures, our training is also Indianized. To some extent, we are training people to understand the perspective of the parties from their point of view, from their cultural point of view, and we need to give importance to their culture so that we can help them so that they go satisfied after resolving their disputes. So our training is little Indianized. It's not, and that is why we give lot of value to emotions. We give lot of value to the culture the parties are coming from. And if so, now coming to the appointment of mediator, at times when we find that somebody is from a particular cultural background, as an organizing secretary, I try to find out a person who is from that cultural background or from that region. If I get that type of mediator, I feel very comfortable. Okay, these parties will be comfortable. So of course, we have to be sensitive about culture also. Over to you,
maybe Hazel can give us a perspective on the ICC as to what are the parameters that you keep in mind when you appoint a mediator in a particular dispute. How does the appointment process pan out? What are those requisites, or what are those attributes that you look at in a mediator with respect to a particular dispute?
It is
Hazel?
quite similar, I would say. Hi. It is quite similar. So first, the ADR Center, when they first receive a request for mediation, they do look at the disputes itself. They look at the parties, where they are from, and they try to find a mediator who has first industry experience, if that's necessary for the dispute, or jurisdictional experience in that particular jurisdiction, so they can relate to and understand the culture of the parties or that disputes. And we also look at qualifications. We do look for mediators who are trained, at least at some center, because like I said, and as everyone has said, the mediator skill set is one that is trained. It is something that we do emphasize, because there is a particular process that should be followed, and the qualifications are important to ensure the mediator has the right training to handle that process. We do also look at the jurisdictions of the nationalities of the parties sometimes. Unlike in an arbitration, where when we look for an arbitrator, we look for an arbitrator who is not of the same nationality as parties, so that the arbitrator is considered neutral in that sense. In a mediation, sometimes we look at the nationality of the party, and look for a mediator who has the same nationality as the party, so that they can build rapport more easily with the party and be able to manage the process more effectively. So those are some of the things I will look for when selecting the right mediator for the particular dispute.
Now we've got a very interesting question from Mahima Saini. Now Mahima talks, now this is very interesting because it relates to neutral ways of child rearing. So her question is, she says, she apologizes saying that it's a novice question, and she goes on to say that, isn't the supposed softness or inherent conciliatory abilities in a woman the deliberate outcome of the way in which women are raised right from childhood? Can't these skills be imbibed in other genders too by neutral ways of child rearing? So we're having very interesting questions.
I agree. Short answer, I agree.
I agree as well. It's all about training and environment and upbringing and the personal characteristics.
Sure. In fact, now there's a question from Mr. JP Singh, who's one of India's leading mediators. Somebody's name who, along with Veena and others, is synonymous with the process of arbitration in India. Now, JP says, drawing a gender presumption may be incorrect, but gender balance does play a role, especially in matrimonial disputes. Don't you think so? He says, should I repeat the question? Drawing a general presumption may be incorrect, but gender balance does play a role, especially in matrimonial disputes. Don't you think so?
If I may answer, yes, JP is very right. I take this liberty to answer in the beginning, then over to Chitra. Yes, it plays a very important role to create the gender balance, because there are many sensitive issues involved in those matrimonial discords for which parties are before you, and some of the parties feel comfortable with female mediators and some feel comfortable with male. For example, male feels more comfortable with male mediator, and female may like to share some personal information with the female mediator, and it works wonderfully in those matters. So in particularly in matrimonial matters, for gender balance, male and female combination really works successfully.
I'm afraid I can't quite comment on that, because we don't usually handle matrimonial mediations at ICC. Most of our mediations are commercial disputes.
I'd say yes and no. I'd say, so this goes back to what I was saying initially. There is a sensitivity that women probably bring because of their experiences as women, the disempowerment they have faced as well. And that might be, important in relating to and understanding the issues in the dispute. But I think we need to be aspirational here, and I think we need to stop looking at is it only a woman who can understand this? I think we need better men then, many more better men who, and persons of all genders, who are sensitive to vulnerabilities that others face, to disempowerment that others face, to imbalances that may be obvious in front of you when the mediation is going on. And so I'd like to see a day when persons of all genders are sensitive to the issues that are coming up in the mediation, and are able to help the parties along.
Sure. Now we have another question, a very interesting question, which has come from Mahima Saini. Mahima puts a question to Chitra and Veena. She says, do we have any empaneled transgender mediators in India? And the second part of it is, what can be done to increase their representation in light of the rising acceptance of gender diversity beyond the binary of male and female?
I'm sorry
Finally,
to say I don't know any
even I don't.
transgender
No, even I am not
mediators.
aware.
Okay.
Same is with me, Ajay. I also can't name anybody whom I know.
Sure. There's another question which has come from JP now. JP asked the question, it's a question to Hazel. In the matter of appointment of a mediator or an arbitrator by the ICC, do you look at the domain expertise of the person? I think with respect to arbitration, the answer is a clear yes, but then mediation, do you look at domain expertise when you're looking at appointing a mediator under the ICC rules?
When you talk about domain expertise, do you mean the construction expertise and perhaps the particular industry expertise? The answer is yes. Industry expertise is definitely something that we look for, because especially in certain commercial disputes, it would be easier for a mediator to help the process if they can understand the nuances in the industries, because not everything is written in law. There are certain practices which parties may have practiced in that led to the dispute, which the mediator, if he has experience in that particular industry, he would be able to understand and better communicate with parties on that level. So the answer is definitely a yes.
Great. I have a question, actually, a corollary to that. Like the ICC Court of Arbitration has now case management teams which are located beyond the Paris headquarters. Do you have the mediation services also be offered beyond the HQ in Paris?
Right now, there are no plans for that yet, especially in these current times when the world has become very much a virtual world. A lot of things are being handled online and remotely. So far, the mediation case management team is based only in Paris, because even though they're based in Paris, they do handle the mediations around the world. And we have not seen any issue on that front. But who knows what will happen? The mediation scene is fast evolving, and with the Singapore Convention and, if you will, the increase in the mediation options, especially in light of the current situation, we have seen an increase in requests from all jurisdictions for mediation. Who knows what will happen? But so far, from my experience, I've not heard of any plans to that effect, but I'll keep you informed if there are.
Thanks, Hazel. Now, there's a question from Atar Alam. He's talking about the mechanics of mediation during this COVID-19 pandemic. How do you conduct mediations virtually? How is mediation conducted during these COVID-19 pandemic times? What are the mechanics? How does the process pan out? Is it effective? That's his question.
We have been conducting mediations online. And I think there is an initial sort of discomfort because we're not in the same room. We are trained to, as Veenaji and Hazel mentioned, to listen and to understand and to pick up non-verbal cues as well. I'm sorry, my cats are fighting. To pick up non-verbal cues as well. And so, you know, there is a sort of an artificial wall because we're all not in the same room. But my personal experience has been that over time, as you keep talking and you spend more time speaking virtually and listening to each other virtually, these walls sort of dissolve, and it's quite like, you know, sitting together and speaking. And I think the quality of communication online has improved enormously, and I think we are able to see gestures, see cues, and sort of relate to each other a lot more than I think we apprehended we might not be able to on the online world.
Thanks, Chitra. Maybe any perspective from the Samadhan perspective? How is the Delhi High Court mediation?
Yes, Ajay, thanks for giving me this chance because I really want to speak about Samadhan's online work going on since June. Of course, we took about 2-3 months after the lockdown was declared. But I must tell you that we are doing it very successfully. It is being done on Cisco WebEx system. Of course, confidentiality in the initial stage was the major concern for which we all put our heads together to see how to manage that part. And the moment you open the screen, as undertaking pops up on the screen itself, and they accept that, and then they walk into the web meeting room. And when they find a mediator sitting there in front of them and making an opening statement, which is basically very important, and every mediator would be knowing about that, and giving them that comfort that though it is not a physical meeting room, but this web meeting room is as secured as a four-walled room where physically parties have been coming. Explaining them the process that meeting room can be logged when caucuses are taking place, and you can share anything or everything with me during that time. Of course, there are sometimes technical glitches which parties may face or even mediator may face. But that opening statement in the initial stage itself, it clarifies all those things, then parties feel very comfortable. And I must tell you, at Samadhan, we are very successfully doing it. And many people who at present are not in a position to reach courts because of many and various reasons, they are approaching us at pre-litigation stage or for conciliation, because Samadhan is doing pre-litigation and conciliation as well. We are the one who are doing mediation absolutely paperless, and we have created an environment for our staff who is absolutely protected because nobody is visiting the mediation room, neither mediators, not the parties, not the council. So mediation has reached everybody's home. They are very comfortable doing it while sitting at home. Even at 8 o'clock, they don't mind it. They say, anytime, ma'am, give us time. So we are very thankful to our High Court who has provided us this platform. Our mediators are happy. They are occupied in their work, and even parties are going back satisfactorily. People are comfortable. They are getting their results in their hands while sitting at home. So we are very much successful in this, I must say that. And thanks to our High Court and our committee.
Sure. I had a question actually relating to this compulsory pre-institution litigation, which has been introduced now under the Commercial Courts Act. How successful has that been? What has been the experience? Maybe the Madras High Court experience, and followed probably by the Delhi High Court experience with compulsory pre-litigation, pre-institution litigation. Chitra, over to you.
In my impression is that it hasn't been very successful in Madras. I think there is a couple of reasons for it, and the first is in the statute itself, in that if there is an interim relief that parties need, then the mandate drops. So you can apply to the court, and you can file your suit in court without having to go through the mandatory pre-institution mediation. Often, and this is my experience, often cases are filed at the time when there is a need for an interim relief. That's the trigger, usually for cases to be filed. And therefore, you automatically approach the court, and this mandate, like I said, is no longer there. The second, I think, aspect, I think that sort of diminishes the chances of parties resorting to pre-institution mediation is the fact that mediation is conducted by the Legal Services Authority. I think parties would, particularly commercial parties, would cherish a greater autonomy in their choice of a mediator. And I think that plays a role as well. But this is my impression of how things are in the Madras High Court.
Veena, over to you, the Delhi experience.
My experience is different from what Chitra speaks. In Delhi, of course, under the Act, the authority is Delhi State Legal Services Authority only. and there is no infrastructure, no mediators on their panel who can carry forward this process of mediation. Here again, thanks to our Delhi High Court, an understanding was created in the shape of an SOP by which the matters are being referred to the concerned mediation centers depending upon the pecuniary jurisdiction of the matter involved. So far as Chitra talked about urgent matters, of course, urgent matters can go to courts, but that urgency is also being seen through a lens of exceptional urgency so far as Delhi High Court is concerned and the courts below are concerned. In general, we find many matters being filed with the state legal authority and they forward the matter to us after taking consent of the parties. This is the understanding. The whole process of taking consent is done by them. After the parties consent, it is referred to the concerned mediation center depending upon the pecuniary jurisdiction of that particular matter. As in matters relating to the issues where pecuniary jurisdiction is above 2 crores, it is referred to Samadhan. We are conducting them with the help of our designated senior mediators who are on our panel, and we are successfully responding back to them, giving them settlement agreements in their hands as it is provided under the Act. That settlement is an award in itself. Under the Act, they don't have to go anywhere else and people are going back happily. So my experience is absolutely different. We are successfully conducting even PIMs under the Commercial Courts Act.
Thank you, Chitra and Veena, for those insights. We're running a little short on time. There's one last question, time for just one last question. There was talk about a mediation bill. Where are we with that? If it's not confidential, do we know what's happened to a mediation bill which was supposedly in the works, in the making?
The bill has, or the draft bill has been sent by the Mediation Conciliation Project Committee to the government. So that's as far as we know. Sure. I think it's important that we have a legislation soon because we are one of the earliest signatories to the Singapore Convention, and we need domestic law that supports not recognition, the enforcement of mediated settlements, international mediated settlements.
Great, Chitra. Thank you very much. And I think we've totally run out of time. Now, may I call upon my colleague Chaitali to please give us the final words, the closing remarks. Over to you, Chaitali.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's insightful webinar. It was a pleasure to be a part of the fruitful discussions, though personally I feel 1.5 to 2 hours is not enough. We could have gone on much longer. The topic for the session was the soft way of doing hard things. Do women make better mediators? And we saw 3 different approaches to the same theme. Chitra's deconstruction of the topic provided a clarity on the process of mediation and its role in norm generation, norm education, and norm creation in different areas of laws such as IPR. Manu took us away from the binary understanding of gender while addressing the questions which are pertinent throughout the discussion. Firstly, is mediation considered soft or hard? And secondly, do women make better mediators? Veena ji's experiences in the appointment of mediators provided a fresh outlook of what parties are looking for in the mediation process. Women bring soft skills, facilitating dialogue between the conflicting parties. They are empathetic, non-threatening, rational, and more caring. However, as you rightly said, this does not imply that men do not make good mediators. It only means that women can naturally create a more comfortable environment. In the third segment, we had Hazel, who provided an institutional perspective by highlighting the role of the ICC. It's positive to see the training and the experience that a mediator goes through and how these play a significant role in their appointment rather than gender. The role of the mediator is not only to ask the right questions, but also to ask the questions in the right way. The process of mediation requires a skill set to facilitate communication. The opinion expressed by all the speakers justified the topic that mediation is hard and it's not very easygoing. A mediator must possess perseverance, persistence, and patience, patience, patience. The takeaway from the discussion is twofold. Firstly, gender does not necessarily play a significant role in mediation. It is the knowledge and the skill that adds to the utility of a mediator. Secondly, in a situation where the involvement of a woman is higher, for example, as Veena-ji said, in a mediation with both a man and a woman brings a unique set of experiences to the mediation process. This, of course, again goes with the disclaimer that one cannot presume men do not possess empathy or sensitivity. Respected members of the panel, on behalf of the CADR and Manav Rachna University, I would like to pay my respect and sincerest thanks to all of you for being a part of today's webinar, regardless of the jurisdictional as well as the time differences.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chetali. Thank you, Ajay, for giving us this opportunity. It was a pleasure being here on this panel.
Thank you,
Chetali. Thank you,
everyone.
Ajay. And thank you to my esteemed panelists. I've learned a lot from this panel discussion as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Same here. Bye-bye.
Mr. Thomas, we can't hear you.
Sorry, all I was saying is my parting words are thanks a ton, and we hope to see all of y'all at one of our future webinars, which and we intend doing a lot of these webinars in the coming year. Thanks to COVID-19 and the ability to connect with people across borders through webinars, we are going to be exploiting this medium more often in the year to come. So thanks a ton. I hope all of you have a very pleasant evening, and we look forward to seeing some of you all at one of our future webinars. Good evening and bye for now. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.